Hi, this is Commissioner Blackwell? Commissioner Blackwell, are you on?
Figures out how to unmute.
He's on. I think he's just needs to unmute himself.
Okay, if you know he's on, I'll just mark him as present. Commissioner Crandall?
Here.
Commissioner Kozinski?
Here.
Commissioner Wu?
Here.
And Chair Rulin?
Here.
And from the City Council, just to mark that we don't have a quorum, Councilmember James?
Here.
Councilmember Ward?
Here.
And Councilmember Ham will not be present. Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson is not currently available. She expects to be here about 6:30, at which time the council meeting will convene in joint session with the Planning Commission. The first item on the agenda is the inclusionary housing program in lieu fee. And Chairman, we do have some speaker comments whenever you're ready to hear them.
Okay. Very good. I think we should hear this, in this case, should we hear the staff report before those comments? That's normally what we do, but.
Okay, that's your call. That's okay.
Okay. Then very good. Let's go ahead and have the staff presentation, and then we will hear some comments before we enter discussion. So Jennifer Savage is going to take us through the inclusionary housing program in lieu fee presentation. Please, Jennifer.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners and Council members. Jennifer Savage, Senior Planner with the City of San Clemente. This evening, as you mentioned, we are looking at the inclusionary housing program in lieu fee. And I wanted to start with a little bit of context before we go into the consultant presentation and PowerPoint. So, two things. One is that we are looking at this as part of a larger effort to implement policies within the general plan and the housing element. And those policies, and I should say more accurately goals, are to provide affordable housing for residents and for the city in San Clemente. This is an implementation program of the housing element, so it is a tool to implement our existing housing element. And then the second thing I wanted to point out is, besides the requirements that are in the general plan and the housing element, this is really an opportunity and can be an opportunity, a tool to provide housing opportunities for all income levels. And so this tool would really provide an opportunity to, or continue to provide an opportunity for a variety of housing types and even housing services. So it is important to consider what we are looking at tonight in terms of what our goals are for the city and affordable housing opportunities. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie Cooper and Darren Smith. They are both with the Economic Planning Systems Consulting firm. And if we could have the PowerPoint presentation put up and turn it over to Julie. Thank you.
Good evening. This is not Julie Cooper. This is Darren Smith, but Julie is on the line and she'll be presenting as well as I a few slides from now. But we are from Economic and Planning Systems. We are a consulting firm that's been in California for almost 40 years now and worked on a number of projects in San Clemente over the years prior to this one. We've done a lot of work throughout the state on inclusionary housing ordinances and updates to existing ordinances and fee programs, and that's why we were retained to assist with this work. On the first slide, that is the next slide, we just want to talk a little bit about the inclusionary housing program, and I will apologize in advance if I am speaking to people who know everything about this, but for purpose of context setting, it's important, I think, to establish what we're talking about in case there are any audience members or members of this group that are not quite as up to speed as others. So an inclusionary housing program, which the city has had for a generation now, is a program through which new residential development is required to provide affordable housing units as part of their otherwise market rate housing development. And it's been common throughout California for, again, a full generation or more. Over 100 communities in California have these kinds of programs, and San Clemente is among those. The reason that communities have adopted inclusionary housing programs historically is because they recognize a need for affordable housing that is not being provided by the market, and particularly at the low and very low income levels, where the costs of development are simply higher than can be supported by the incomes that households at those income levels can support. So the intention is to provide accessibility to high quality housing for a range of households types, with the intention of allowing for economic diversity within your community, and also to have people who may be providing goods and services to your community but are not among the higher paid workers an opportunity to live near their work. And why are we considering an update? The program has been around for over 20 years, but has not been updated since 2008. And so it's important from time to time to just take another look and see if the economics that are embedded within an inclusionary housing program are up to date and reflective of modern development economics, as well as priorities for the city. Next slide, please. So as part of this, I see we have some formatting issues here, but I'll try to work through that. We are considering the following questions as part of our scope. What are the city's inclusionary requirements? Are the inclusionary requirements consistent with your neighboring jurisdictions? Are the in lieu fee levels, and I should have mentioned, it is typical that inclusionary housing programs will require development to have to provide a certain number of affordable housing units, but as an alternative means of compliance, many communities, most even, allow developers, under certain circumstances at least, to pay a fee in lieu of providing those units. And so that's one of the things we're focused on here this evening, is that in lieu fee. And is that in lieu fee level adequate to support the development of the new affordable housing units that would be required if the developer does not provide them within their own project? Relatedly, are the in lieu fee levels encouraging or discouraging the on-site affordable unit development? And there can be merits to wanting it either way there, but that's an objective analysis that we've tried to provide. Are these inclusionary requirements creating feasibility issues for market rate development? And what are the options for changing the inclusionary requirements to better support your affordable housing development while limiting any unintended or negative feasibility issues? So that's the scope of what we have been looking at and will continue to look at, but we're at a point in our analysis where we wanted some feedback. And first of all, to make sure that you understood what we were doing, but also a bit of direction, as we'll speak to it toward the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Just for a little additional context, it's always good to know what we're talking about in terms of affordability. The standard for determining affordability has to do with the incomes of households, and it starts with a median income, that is the 50th percentile household, and it's done on a county by county basis. So in this case, it's reported for Orange County, not necessarily the same as the median income for San Clemente as a city. But in this case, a 3-person household, and these numbers come from HUD and HCD, a 3-person household, the median income is around $93,000. And so that means that at low income, which is up to 80% of median income, there's a little bit of a trick of the math here because it's not quite as straightforward as one might think, and I can get into that if there's interest, but the applicable standards are that for very low income, which is what your inclusionary program orients toward, the very low income household at 50% of median income is around $58,000 per household. And you see some other numbers on here as well. And we compare those incomes and the rents that they are able to pay at 30% of their gross income to what a typical market rate two-bedroom apartment might command in San Clemente, which we estimate to be about $3,000 per month. And you see that even moderate income households can afford to pay a little bit less than your current market rate pricing. And the same goes on the far right column for sale prices, and perhaps even more so. A typical market rate home here in San Clemente is going for just over $1 million for newly constructed units, and at affordable prices it would be roughly half or less than that. So you see the offset between what market rate standards are versus the affordable housing standards. Next slide, please. We also wanted to look back at what has been created through a variety of affordable housing programs in San Clemente. This is units that have been produced over the last 20 years or so. You've got roughly 500 affordable housing units, of which just over half are for seniors, 55 or 62 years and up. A little less than half are oriented to families. So that's an interesting dichotomy there of what has been produced, but there have been, I guess that's 8 separate projects that have provided affordable housing in San Clemente over the last 20 years. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we needed to consider in putting this analysis together are the context of San Clemente in particular, and in the case of your city, you're primarily built out. There isn't a vast reserve of undeveloped land. Most of the land that can still be developed in the future are relatively small sites, and we know that land costs can be very high in San Clemente. And we've seen transactions for as high as $220 per square foot to acquire land for development. We know also that the housing element, which is required by law to identify a certain number of sites that can accommodate the regional housing needs allocation, has identified sites with capacity for over 600 new units. So there is some capacity left, but we also recognize and fully understand that your city is largely built out. In terms of zoning, you have created an affordable housing overlay, which represents a specific opportunity for affordable development. A couple of affordable apartment buildings have been produced within that overlay district, as well as some market rate housing. And we also know that the regional housing needs allocation, the RHNA numbers for San Clemente, have fallen a bit short of the expected total production, which is not at all unusual for communities in California to have not fully met their RHNA requirement. We also expect that the 6th cycle, the next cycle of RHNA numbers that you will be inheriting, are going to be expecting still more housing than you have identified sites for in your past housing element. So there will be a challenge to identifying sites with the densities required to reach the expected allocation of housing units for your community. Next slide, please. So, what are the city's inclusionary requirements? And unfortunately, this is not as straightforward as it might be. You have had an inclusionary requirement since 1980. It has been revised 3 times since then. It applies to projects of 6 or more units. And according to your housing element, its requirement is to provide 4% of the units in a project for households at very low income, earning 50% or less of median income. Your zoning code says something different. Your zoning code says that it's a 15% rather than 4%, and that the income levels targeted are a bit different as well, and include low and moderate income households, not just very low. So there is a bit of a disconnect within your documentation, but the way that the city has been implementing this requirement for forever, as far as I can tell, is at the 4% level, consistent with the housing element, rather than the 15% requirement in the zoning code. Next slide, please. Your program provides a couple of choices for developers. Of course, they are asked to provide the units on site, or they can provide them off site. They can provide land to a nonprofit developer to fulfill their requirement, and this has happened, or they can pay an in lieu fee. And the in lieu fee is the primary focus of our analysis, but can extend beyond that. Currently, the in lieu fee is slated to be applied as 1% of the construction value for a new project. If they choose not to provide the units on site, they can pay a fee based on 1% of their construction value, and that construction value is according to a schedule that the city building department maintains that, as we will show a few slides down the line, is not up to date in terms of the actual cost of construction and development in San Clemente. But that is the way that the fee has been applied in the past and interpreted in the past. Next slide, please. What can you use the fees for? It can be used to purchase land or existing units to preserve or provide new affordable housing. And of course, that includes the construction of new affordable housing units. There is a current fund balance in your in lieu fee reserve fund of $1.8 million. That's funds that have been collected from developments but not yet expended. But there have been loans recently for the Cottons Point Senior Apartments and the Las Palmas Village. So there's just a couple of examples of where the fees collected have been spent. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned that we are always interested to know where San Clemente's requirements or the city's requirements are relative to some of your neighboring jurisdictions. One of the comments that was received from the public correctly pointed out that not all of the neighboring jurisdictions have an inclusionary policy at all, but those that do are shown here on this chart and the next one. So we see all the way on the left is San Clemente is requiring 4% of units at very low incomes. That's that dark blue, according to your housing element and as has been implemented. Your zoning code says 15%, which would be a combination of low and very low for rental projects. Laguna Beach requires as many as 25%. Laguna Woods is 15, Lake Forest 15, San Juan Capistrano and Oceanside and Encinitas. Well, those two, San Juan Capistrano and Oceanside, are at 10%, and Encinitas provides two options, low income units at 15% low income or 10% very low income. So that's where some of your neighbors are, but again, it is correct to state that a number of your neighbors do not have these policies at all. The next slide shows similar information, but on the for sale development rather than rental. Next slide, please. And again, we show the 4% requirement for very low all the way on the left in San Clemente. And again, these other communities, if they require inclusionary housing, tend to be at 10 to 15%, with Laguna Beach being an outlier there, requiring 25% affordable housing. So that's, again, a survey of some of the jurisdictions around you and where you stack up for now. But it is important to note that these are not necessarily apples to apples. Your requirement for both for sale and rental is at very low incomes, 4% at very low incomes. And so the amount of subsidy required for very low income units is greater than the subsidy required for low income or moderate income units. So it's not strictly a matter of looking at that 4% versus 10 or 15%, but also it's important to keep in mind the income level that is sought under the program. Next slide, please. All right, and here I will turn it over to Julie Cooper.
Hi, thanks, Darren, and good evening, everyone. EPS completed 2 technical analyses as part of its scope of work. The first was to estimate the subsidy needed to support the development of new affordable units, as the housing element directs the city to compare that subsidy that's needed to the 1% of construction cost that is the fee that's being levied. So as described here, in order to make this calculation, we assumed a sort of prototypical affordable unit that might be developed in the city, which is a 2-bedroom rental apartment affordable to a 3-person household at very low income, which is, again, 50% of the area median income. The cost to develop such a unit using our assumptions is around $415,000, and the value based on the rent that's affordable to this household is around $158,000. So this results in a subsidy that would be needed of about $257,000 to actually make the numbers work to construct such a unit. So as we can see, this needed subsidy is well above what the current fees being charged are in the city. So 4% of the $257,000 would be around $10,000 per market rate unit. By comparison, we see that 1% of construction costs based on the 2019 building valuation data from the city's building department, 1% of construction costs for an apartment is about $1.38 per square foot and $1.57 per square foot for a single family house. And if we were to, for example, apply these numbers to either, let's say, a 950 square foot apartment or a 2,800 square foot house, we'd be looking at fees somewhere between $1,500 and about $4,500 per market rate unit. So again, less than half of what we are seeing is the likely subsidy needed to actually support the development of new affordable units. Next slide, please. Just for a little bit of real-world context, we looked at the fees that have been paid most recently by projects in the city that were subject to the inclusionary housing requirements. This is the Coastline Mixed Use project and the Sea Summit development. And so what this table shows is that the fees paid per market rate unit for these 2 projects was between about $1,500 and $3,200 per unit. And if we were to apply that number to the number of affordable units that they would have had to build, that implies a subsidy of between $40,000 and $80,000 approximately. And again, we're finding that really you need over $250,000 subsidy to support the development of a new affordable unit in the city. So definitely a bit of a difference here between these, what's being charged and what's really needed. Next slide, please. So the second analysis that we completed was to test the impacts of the impacts of the inclusionary housing requirements on new development in the city. And we looked at both the existing requirements, the 4%, as well as a number of alternative requirement scenarios. I should note that the assumptions we used to model the costs and values both for these market rate products as well as the affordable product presented in the last couple of slides were ones that are based on our market research for the San Clemente area, and also something that we vetted with a number of representatives from the developer community. There's no perfect number for doing these analyses because every project is unique, but we try to find something that's relatively generic that can at least be illustrative, but understanding that there is variations in those assumptions that should be taken into account. So the The inclusionary scenarios that we tested include, as I said, your current policy, which is 4% rental units provided at very low income. We looked at the zoning code policy, which is 15% rental units provided or supported for a combination of very low, and moderate income households. And then what I'm calling here the neighborhood rate, which is about 10% rental units for a combination of low and moderate income households, somewhat in line with what we showed in the previous bar charts, is found in your neighboring cities that do have their own inclusionary housing policies. Next slide, please. So I'll go through this slide a little bit slowly just to sort of explain it, and then the next ones I'll go a little quicker. So here what we're showing are the impacts of the existing inclusionary requirements on new multifamily development in the city. So the gray bars represent the per unit cost for developing new multifamily units. So in this case, that's around just a bit over $400,000. In addition, under the two options where the project, this hypothetical project would pay an in lieu fee, we show the amount of that in lieu fee as a red bar on top of the gray bar. The blue bar represents the value of each of the units based on achievable rents. So for the projects that are in this scenario that are opting to pay the in lieu fee, that's, these are all market rate units, and the value is just under $500,000 assumed. For the project where they would opt to build the units on site, the value is a little lower because you're incorporating, it's a blended rate of the market rate and the affordable units, and of course the affordable units have a lower value because they have a lower achievable rent. And then these numbers to the left of the brackets show the difference between the value and the cost, which in this case we're showing is positive across all three options. So the overall takeaway from this slide and what we'll show in the next several slides is that new multifamily development should be able to bear the cost of the existing inclusionary policy. Additionally, we can see that it's most beneficial for the developer from a profit standpoint to pay the fee that's based on 1% of construction cost. And it is least beneficial for them to provide the units on site. And the fee that's based on actually meeting the subsidy need for the 4% of affordable units falls in between these two in terms of how it affects developer profit. Next slide, please. So this is also showing the current policy, the 4%, but as applied to a new single-family home development in the city. So, of course, the costs and the values are slightly different because we're looking at a different product. But again, we do see that this project should be able to bear the cost of the inclusionary policy, and again, it's most beneficial to pay the construction cost-based fee and least beneficial to provide the on-site units. One note that I'll make about another difference between this analysis and the one on the previous slide is that while the previous slide assumed that the affordable and market rate units are the same product, a two-bedroom apartment, this slide assumes that the affordable product is also a two-bedroom apartment while the market rate is a four-bedroom home. So that is sort of in line with what your current requirements are, that the affordable units are rental apartments. Next slide, please. So now we're going to basically show the same sort of analysis, but for different inclusionary requirements. So here we're looking at the impacts on a new multifamily development of your zoning code requirement, which would be 7.5% of units for affordable for very low income households and 7.5% for low income households. And once again, we see that the paying a fee is more beneficial than providing units on site. In this case, we didn't model a construction cost-based fee since that's not included in your zoning code. We just modeled either a fee that's based on the subsidy that's needed or the cost of providing on-site units. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Julie, I just wanted to clarify something. When you say that it's more beneficial, you mean it's more beneficial for the builder. You're not necessarily saying it's more beneficial for the city, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it is more beneficial for the developer. So this is sort of getting into that question we alluded to at the beginning, which is how does what is the incentive for the developer? Is the in lieu fee program encouraging or discouraging the building of new affordable units? And so from a profit standpoint, or from a developer profit standpoint, it would be more beneficial to pay a fee in this case than to build the units on site.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Next slide, please. And then this is also looking at your zoning code and the requirements for new single-family home development, which is slightly different. It's a mix of very low, and moderate income units, affordable units. And once again, we see that the profit for when under the option of paying the fee is greater than under the option of building the units on site. Next slide, please. So in these last two slides of this section, we look at the impacts of a scenario where the city would have a 10% requirement, affordability requirement. So in this case, we're looking at multifamily development that would require 10% of units affordable to low-income households. Next slide, please. And here we're looking at a single-family home development where 5% of the units would be affordable to low-income households, 5% to moderate. And once again, we see that the results of a subsidy-based fee is more beneficial, although only slightly so, from a profit standpoint to a developer paying the fee than building the units on site. Next slide, please. So overall, based on the assumptions that we used around development costs and values in the city, it appears that new development should be able to bear the costs of the inclusionary housing requirement, even if it were to be raised from the current levels. We also found that given these same assumptions, it is generally the developers would generally be incentivized to pay an in lieu fee rather than build affordable housing units either on-site or off-site. So with all of that math out of the way, I'm going to turn it back over to Darren to lead us into the discussion portion.
Thank you, Julie. And before I do, there is one point of business that I want to make sure everyone understands. The way that the in lieu fees are currently calculated and the way it is required to be calculated under your current program is at 1% of the nominal construction value, and that is according to a schedule that your building department maintains based on other data. But fundamentally what that schedule says is that it costs $138 a square foot to build apartments. And our analysis, which again we have vetted with developers and representatives in the real estate market, our analysis indicates that it costs over $400 a square foot to build apartments today, not $138 as is embedded in that schedule maintained by the building department, which is why there is such an offset between what the current calculation formula suggests should be the in lieu fee versus what we suggest the true subsidy to produce these units is. So again, all of that is a lot of math, and we haven't even shown all our work here, and we're happy to do that. But fundamentally what we are hoping to get this evening are some discussion about the city's priorities as they relate to affordable housing and the inclusionary program in particular. It's been noted that the fee program, whether as has been calculated or even as we have calculated it, is more advantageous to a developer than producing the units on site. And we know that communities, individuals have different opinions on whether it's most important to have the units mixed in with market rate units so that it's a truly mixed income development, even if it's only 4% of the units that are at affordable prices. And in other communities, they feel that they can better leverage the fees if they collect the money and combine it with tax credits and other forms of capital to create perhaps still more affordable housing than could be provided if it's only going to be 4% of the units on site. So that's one of the things we wanted to talk about this evening. Another is that we find in doing this for a number of communities that some are swayed significantly by wanting to be in a certain position relative to their neighboring jurisdictions. And we know that the 4% is a bit of an outlier with respect to what other jurisdictions do if they have affordable and inclusionary program. Again, it is correct and true to point out that not every community does, but those that do tend to be more in the 10 to 15% inclusionary range. And so we wanted to talk about those issues and get your opinion and a bit of direction, because we are scoped to look at alternatives to your existing program, or we can stop here if you are satisfied that the program you have now is meeting your needs and expectations and want to stick with your 4%. That's fine too. It's just a matter of what you are interested in. And as sort of the other side of the coin, if there are going to be these kinds of requirements, whether they're the existing requirements or perhaps even greater requirements in the future, are there incentives that the city can provide to somewhat offset and balance out those inclusionary requirements and make projects more feasible, with the understanding that ultimately what you're looking to do here is produce housing, that without projects coming forward, you will get neither affordable units nor in lieu fees. And so the balancing of developer financial interests and the community's policy interests can sometimes involve incentives that can offset some of those affordable housing requirements for development. So with that, I'll pause and be here to listen and respond, Julie and I, as you all discuss these items.
Thank you. And I think maybe before we enter discussion and pepper you with questions, it might be a good time for us to read our public comments that have been sent in, so we can consider that in our discussion. So Joanne, would you could you read those public comments for us?
It'll actually be Deputy City Clerk Laura Campanolo.
Forgive me. And just a note for the record that Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson has joined us during that presentation.
Okay, first comment is from, John Martinez. Instead of an in lieu fee, developers should be required to build affordable housing on site or off site, but should not be allowed to fulfill their obligation by either paying an in lieu fee or provision of land. Developers are in the best position to build. The city is not. Allowing developers to fulfill their affordable housing obligation by either paying a fee or providing land to the city shifts the burden of the actual physical provision of affordable housing onto the city, which then has to spend tax money to contract with private developers to actually build the units. Imposing the burden on the city is thus highly inefficient and, as the continued shortage of affordable housing shows, ultimately successful. Next comment is from Rona Henry. Dear Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and planning commissioners. I am a member of the Tapestry Unitarian Universalist congregation, which includes residents of San Clemente. Because we have been observing the increasing problem of homelessness in our cities, our congregation started the Welcoming Neighbors Home initiative. We are also deeply concerned about the lack of affordable housing in San Clemente, especially for people whose incomes are below 30% of the average median income. As chair of the Welcoming Neighbors Home Initiative, I commend you for reconsidering your inclusionary housing program. I also want to say how impressed I was with the methodology and analysis presented in the report by Economic Planning Systems Incorporated, EPS. I look forward to hearing more of the details. I've been intrigued with how other cities are using their inclusionary housing policy to encourage affordable housing. I also admire policies that work to integrate low and very low income housing units in with other income levels of housing. What I've learned as I've studied the issue of housing is that the inclusionary housing program is an important policy in helping cities to achieve needed levels of affordable housing. I thank you for your leadership in proactively reconsidering your inclusionary housing program. Next comment is from Leslie Davis. And let me just pull that up here. City Council and Planning Commission. I'm happy to hear the city is taking seriously the steps needed to update the inclusionary housing program. This has been a long time coming. As you know, I was the city's housing coordinator for 20 years, retiring in 2010. I believe the in lieu housing fee should be retired. Collecting it has let the developers off the hook in providing their share of affordable housing. If, as stated, there is $1.8 million in fees available for new affordable housing, and the gap to provide new housing is $257,000 per unit, the funds will only generate 7 new housing units for families earning less than 50% of median income. Considering the fees were collected from about 320 new homes, the fund should have been enough for 4% of development, or 13 units. Since 2016, no new affordable housing has been built, and the likelihood of any new large-scale market rate housing to be built is slim. So how can the city meet its local and regional housing needs? One way is by requiring future developers of more than 6 units to provide the affordable units on-site or off-site of their development. To require 1 unit affordable per 6 new units would slowly add to our affordable housing stock. Small projects along El Camino Real could provide these new units, but it must be required on-site, or the developer would have to purchase condos or apartments off-site and let a nonprofit own and manage them. Another way is for the city to proactively working with landowners and developers to build new affordable housing. Considering the available land in the overlay district, this is not going to occur along El Camino Real. The vacant sites are too small. Developers need an economy of scale to finance and build affordable housing. A few sites come to mind. The Staples site is in the AH overlay, and other sites include city-owned land on La Pata. Do we really need another gas station car wash? Rezone vacant institutional land on Avenida Frontera, allow multiple family housing on the land next to Target, or build new housing with an affordable component on the land at City Hall. In any case, new affordable housing isn't going to happen without the city's involvement. Be proactive, and the 126 new units to meet the RHNA shortfall for very low income housing will get built. I can say from personal experience, all of the affordable housing units in the city were built in conjunction with city, state, and federal financing and staff facilitation. Don't make another mistake and let a developer build rental units like Shorecliff Senior Apartments without affordable units on site. Thank you for your consideration, Leslie Davis. Bear with me. Let's see. Next comment is from Barbara J. Thomas, South Orange County Economic Coalition. Mayor Pro Tem, Council and Planning Commission. On behalf of the South Orange County Economic Coalition, I'm writing to you to express our thoughts regarding the inclusionary housing program in lieu fee. Since 1969, SOCEC has been the leading voice in South Orange County, advocating for a strong and vibrant economic climate, both locally and regionally. We promote advocacy, education, and representation, and speak on behalf of businesses throughout our region on issues relating to public policy and legislation. SOCEC recognizes that more housing is needed to ensure that South Orange County continues to grow in a strategic and beneficial manner with a healthy jobs to housing relationship. We understand that in your study session, you will be discussing your in lieu policy, a policy that has been in place for decades. We hope you will strongly consider a policy that does not restrain housing production, increase ownership costs, and further complicate attainability. With that, we support the reconfiguration of the current formula that could ultimately and significantly reduce the in lieu fee for housing projects. The logic and reasoning behind this proposed reduction of the in lieu fee is exactly what the development community needs during these rare and uncertain times. Thank you for your consideration of SOCEC's request. Let me get to the next comment here, just a couple more. Next comment is from Kimberly Adams with the Housing Advocacy Program Manager. She's with the United Way. Dear Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, San Clemente City Council members, and San Clemente Planning Commissioners, Orange County United Way writes today to express our appreciation for your willingness to examine the inclusionary housing and in lieu fee policies for your city. We applaud your approach to this decision-making process and commitment to being a welcoming community for all. Housing affordability is a persistently growing challenge throughout Orange County for families, veterans, seniors, and individuals as home and rent prices continue to climb. Due to these rising costs, households have to spend over 30% of their income on housing, and a growing number are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, affordable housing was already a growing need in communities throughout the county. Given the disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on working class families, affordable homes will be even more needed as we look to rebuild our local economy. Never before has there been a stronger desire to end homelessness and create housing in Orange County. In 2018, United Way launched United to End Homelessness, a powerful collaboration among Orange County's top businesses, philanthropic, government, faith-based, and nonprofit leaders committing to ending homelessness and ensuring housing and services are available for every individual who may need them. United to End Homelessness has been a powerful voice in advocating for housing as the solution to end homelessness. And Orange County United Way has always been supported and maintained that affordable, stable housing is the building block to a family's success. Thank you for your comprehensive approach to this matter. We are grateful for your courage and willingness to improve the lives of so many. Next comment is from Donna Vidrine. Dear Mayor Pro Tem Laura Ferguson, City Council members, and Planning Commissioners, as 20-year residents of San Clemente, we write to you today to applaud the city for commissioning a report examining our inclusionary housing program and in lieu fees in order to advance additional affordable housing in our community. Rent-burdened residents and homelessness are at an all-time high in the face of this pandemic. Mass evictions are occurring. Prior to the present crisis, housing affordability was a persistently growing challenge, with households having to spend in excess of 30% of their income on housing and a growing number paying in excess of 50%. Given the disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on working class families, affordable homes will be even more needed as we look to rebuild our local economy. Homelessness prevention should be a priority, and supportive and affordable housing are key to that endeavor. As the city studies the report and weighs its options, I hope that the decision-making process will be guided by a common sense approach and a compassionate heart. Thank you again for your leadership in seeking opportunities and problem solving for affordable, sustainable housing in San Clemente. Sincerely, Donna and Warren Vidrine. Next comment is from Stuart Anderson. Dear Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, City Council members, and Planning Commissioners, as a resident of San Clemente, I write to you today to express my gratitude to the city for commissioning a report examining our inclusionary housing program in order to advance additional affordable housing in our community. Housing has always been expensive in Southern California, but it's becoming increasingly unaffordable, even for full-time working families. The COVID-19 pandemic has only magnified the problems, and homelessness is an increasingly important issue. As the city studies the report and weighs its options, I hope that the decision-making process will be guided by a common sense approach and a compassionate heart. Thank you again for your thoughtful leadership. Stuart T. Anderson. Next comment is from Mildred Perez with the Kennedy Commission. Dear City Council and Planning Commissioners, the Kennedy Commission is a broad-based coalition of residents and community organizations that advocates for the production of homes affordable for families earning less than $27,000 annually in Orange County. Formed in 2001, the Commission has been successful in partnering and working with Orange County jurisdictions to create effective housing and land use policies that has led to the new construction of homes affordable to lower income working families. The City of San Clemente has not met its affordable housing needs. It is important the city review its progress towards meeting its regional housing needs allocation as it considers changes to the inclusionary housing program. The city's current inclusionary housing program requires that the projects with more than 6 units provide 4% affordable rental units for very low income households earning 50% or less of area's median income. The current in lieu fee is based on 1% of construction value and compared to 4% of the subsidy needed to develop an affordable unit to ensure it corresponds with the current affordability gap. San Clemente has been able to use these funds for loans towards Cotton Point Senior Apartments in Las Palmas Village. These two projects provided a total of 28 low and 65 very low income units. Currently, San Clemente's in lieu affordable housing reserve fund has a balance of $1.8 million. For the 2014 to 2021 housing element planning period, the city has a RHNA of 134 very low and 95 low income units. Per RHNA allocation progress reports submitted by the city has built 69 or 46% of the 134 very low income units and 28 or 29% of the 95 low income units. However, for the above moderate income units, the city outperformed and exceeded the RHNA by constructing 519 or 213% of the 244 above moderate income units. While 33 above moderate units were added in 2019, no units were added at the very low and low income levels in the same year. With the remaining fifth cycle RHNA need of 136 lower income homes, it is important the city prioritize the development of new affordable homes by amending and strengthening its inclusionary housing policy to provide low and very low income households on or off site. The in lieu fee calculation should be representative of the true cost of developing affordable housing as stated in the EPS report presented on 9/2/20 to the City Council and Planning Commission joint session. The Commission looks forward to partnering with the city to increase affordable home opportunities for lower income households in the city. Please keep us informed of any updates and meetings regarding strategies to increase affordable homes for lower income households in the city. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at 949-250-0909 or czrc@kennedycommission.org. Next comment is from Steve Lamott. And this is from the Building Industry Association of Southern California. Dear council members and planning commissioners, on behalf of our membership, I write to express our strong opposition to the inclusionary zoning and encourage the city to reduce or eliminate the inclusionary zoning requirement. The Building Industry Association of Southern California, Orange County chapter, is a nonprofit trade association of over 1,100 member companies employing over 100,000 people in the home building industry. Housing remains a critical issue in California, with the situation growing more serious with each passing day. Studies show that the state needs over 180,000 new units each year, and at best we are producing 80,000. This has caused a cascading spike in home prices across the region. With this ever-growing deficit, we need to have an honest conversation about inclusionary zoning policies. In total, such policies restrain housing production, increase ownership costs, and further complicate attainability for the majority of the region. In a study by Benjamin Powell, PhD, and Edward Stringham, PhD, titled Housing Supply and Affordability, Do Affordable Housing Mandates Work?, the authors discovered that in the 45 cities where data was available, new housing production drastically decreased by an average of 31% within 1 year of adopting inclusionary housing policies. Additionally, the study suggests that inclusionary housing policies can increase new housing costs by $22,000 to $44,000, with higher priced markets increasing by $100,000. Supporting these conclusions in a recent report from the Legislative Analyst Office titled Perspectives on Helping Low-Income Californians Afford Housing. In this report, it states that attempting to address the state's affordability challenges primarily through expansion of government programs likely would be impractical. Further, that extending housing assistance to low-income Californians who currently do not receive it either through subsidies or affordable units or housing vouchers, would require an annual funding commitment in the low tens of billions of dollars. As such, it finds that many housing programs, vouchers, rent control, and inclusionary housing attempt to make housing more affordable without increasing the overall supply of housing. This approach does very little to address the underlying cause of California's high housing cost, a housing shortage. Foundations of policy aside, the entire globe has been thrust into the middle of a pandemic. Residents around the country, especially in California, are being asked to self-quarantine and by extension limit their access to work. The economic impact of this pandemic will take years to fully comprehend. Because of this, cities throughout Orange County are now looking at ways to reduce regulations and costs associated with developing housing as a means of spurring economic activity and to create new units. It's important to note that just this week, the city of Santa Ana voted to reduce their inclusionary zoning fee by 66% because not one permit has been pulled since they increased the fee in 2015. Direct evidence that such policies only hampers development. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration. And I believe that's all I have for public comments. Let me just do a quick check. Yeah, no more emails have come in. Yes, so that's all I have for public comments.
And I did get an email, I think the other commissioners did as well, from Mark McGuire. Do you happen to have that one? I don't recall that one being read.
We do have the comment from Mark McGuire. He actually specifically said he didn't need it read into the record, so it was forwarded to council.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, excuse me, Chair Rulon. If a statement is submitted for consideration by somebody who is unable to speak, should it not be read into the record?
I'll leave that to Mal or to staff to answer in terms of the legality of it. It sounds like he was content with it not being read. So,
but it was submitted for our review and consideration.
Mal, do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, Chair Rulon. If a comment was submitted, it should be read in the record. Now, if the speaker has expressly stated his desire not to have it be read, then we can refrain from reading it. But otherwise, it should be read.
Very good. And he just to clarify, Laura, he stated that it need not be read, correct?
Correct. Give me just 1 minute. I'm going to pull up his email.
Okay. I'm asking because it's a little long, so that's all.
Well, my question is, should it be even considered at this point if it's not made available for the public?
Hi, this is Jennifer. If I could just jump in and make it equivalent to a written comment that you might receive on another project in writing, and just distinguish that from a verbal comment. It should still be considered as you go forward today, and the great news is that the comments will be made available for the public as we move forward with the project.
Very good. So this will be part of the public record, correct?
Correct.
Excuse me, but I think I got 2 emails from Mark McGuire. Is that correct? One that says he doesn't
Correct.
one that does not need to be read in, but the other one doesn't very specifically state that.
Right. So in the interest of having us move to discussion and his explicit statement that it need not be read and it will be part of the public record, I'll suggest that we move forward. Joanne, you did mention at the beginning that there might be some administration we need to do once we had a quorum of council members. Is there anything administratively you need us to do?
No, we'll just let the record show that the council meeting commenced at 6:33 upon the arrival of Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson. And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson previously said that she would appreciate you completing serving as chair just for the purposes of continuity.
Very good, thank you. So I will now open this up for our discussion, questions, and other discussion for the council members. We have been basically using the mute button equivalent to the light buttons on our microphones in council chambers. So if you go off mute, I'll notice that and call on you. So is there anyone who has any questions or would like to have any discussion about this? Councilmember Ward.
So I would start off. Is it true I'll ask Mal this question. Is it true that the state housing and the community development department does not require our housing element to include an inclusionary housing program? So is it true that this is not necessary to meet these goals in order to meet our housing element?
Yes, that's accurate. This is a voluntary program, as was noted in the presentation. Not every city has an inclusionary housing ordinance. This is something that we choose to do and can choose not to do.
So following up on that, just for the benefit of everyone, I think we need to definitely discuss that our city is built out and what would the opportunities be. I know our housing element requires us to come up with overlays on property, and I know the Planning Commission has discussed that. It's in our general plan. But the property owners aren't required to do affordable housing on those. And I think we saw that with the Frontera property. It is now a senior, I don't know if it's a memory care, if anyone might jump in. But that was one of the properties I thought that we had put in as an overlay. So I guess what we need to do to figure out is what is our goal going forward to maximize the amount of units that we have overall in the city, or just look at every project individually. But one comment that Mr. McGuire brought up is our housing going forward, I believe, is mixed use development on El Camino Real. And if that's the case, that's the development that would be most affected, I think, by this, unless anyone has any ideas on properties that are within the city that we could do this on. So a comment that he made that I would like taken into consideration and studied is what would the impact be to those mixed-use developments if we were to require each one of them to build affordable housing within their development. So I don't know if that's skipping a little bit on whether we should look at the in lieu fee or requiring them to build, but that's my comment, is we need to be realistic that we are built out, and what is it that we're actually talking about.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. And Councilperson Ward makes a very good point, and I think, as far as the Planning Commission goes, when we consider land uses in town, at varying densities, we work within an envelope. Those parameters are established within our development code, height, setback, etc. And one school of thought is with inclusionary housing, one model could be to increase the density of that housing to still accommodate the need of the developer at regular housing rates, and then adding the affordable housing element with a percentage increase, which could potentially impact the scale of a development. And to Councilperson Ward's comment, I share that concern. Is we are built out, we have opportunities for development, but we have an expected rate of scale, if you will, or a scale of development, which is to maintain the integrity and character of our community. So when we start considering options for increased housing, affordable housing, from a development spatial perspective, we should be very cautious when we do so, because there may be a need, but at what point have we, if we've hit our upper limit, are we going to continue to move that line out so our upper limit continues to change, thus changing potentially, with all due respect to the intent of the purpose here of this program, but with 1,000 cuts, we eventually get to a point of, that we didn't anticipate. And we did see that in the 80s with some redevelopment of properties, not scale-wise, but aesthetically, and we look back on some of the mistakes we made. So I think it's going to be a very important topic to consider in ways that we can accommodate the need without, a detriment, or a severe impact to our community. So I think that's going to be one of our, if not our biggest challenge here.
Thank you. And I will just mention, we will be beginning our regular Planning Commission meeting after we complete the study session. We'll give the study session just as much time as is necessary. Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Oh, thank you, Chair Rulon. This question is for staff. Cecilia, I see you're on the line. I'd like to just ask you a question about the page 4 pertaining to the affordable housing in San Clemente. It lists the units, and we have almost 500. I know we have a good permit program here for the accessible dwelling units in San Clemente. Are any of those so far that have been approved and built affordable that could be included in this? Oh, I think you're on mute. I think she's on mute.
So, Jennifer, are you with us?
Maybe
I am. Hi, this is Jennifer. In regards to the accessory dwelling units, there's 2 components to the question about those being affordable. The first one is how they're being considered now, and that's done through staff going back into actually looking at what those rents are compared to what would be considered affordable rent in the county. And that's done every year with our annual progress report that's required by the state. So yes, some of the existing units that have been built are considered affordable. And then the second component is going forward in the future, HCD, the Housing and Community Department of the state, they've actually pre-approved our region in Orange County to continue that process and assume a certain percentage of all the ADUs in the city as affordable.
Okay, and is there a reason none of those are included in this 497 total?
That's a great question, and we can certainly add that into the total based on the data that we have in our annual progress report. Thank you.
Okay, that would be wonderful. It would help boost our numbers a bit for the RHNA numbers. And secondly, are we providing that as an option, an alternative for developers, even in the 6-unit plus, to provide an affordable accessory dwelling unit or even a junior accessory dwelling unit to count towards the affordable housing dwelling?
Not explicitly, but developers always have the option in identifying the unit, whether it's an ADU or not, as affordable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Crandall.
Yes, I think right now the general plan says we are looking to add affordable housing. So we're going to assume the policy is we're trying to satisfy these requirements. In the last 8 years, apparently, according to this report, there were 581 affordable housing units that were required. And I assume every 8 years from now till eternity, we're going to have to come up with 581 units every 8 years. Is that correct? This is for the presenters.
This is Jennifer again. That particular number is actually produced every 8-year, what they call planning period. So it will vary by year. And at this point, we're anticipating our next 8-year period to be close to 1,000 units.
Okay, very good. And the reason I brought that up is onesie, twosie ADU units and trying to make mixed-use units considered affordable. We're not going to get 1,000 units in 8 years, or it's going to have to be more intense than those items solving the problem. Another question to the presenter was, we are requiring developers of 6 units or more to kick into the in lieu fees. What are the other cities requiring? When do developers have to start kicking into the in lieu fees?
I'll let Jennifer correct me if I'm wrong, because the city staff did this analysis, but our understanding is it's pretty varied. Some cities require it for any development or as few as developments with 2 units. I think I've seen some of the cities require it for those with 4 or more units. I think 6 is on the higher end in terms of the minimum size, just among the peer cities that we looked at.
Very good. And with our 4%, am I correct that you don't have to actually provide a unit until you have 25 unit project? You have to, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, because otherwise you would just be providing a fractional unit.
Exactly.
It would be required. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so looking at our densities, our opportunity to provide projects that have 25 units is pretty slim. So the only way to collect or get funding for the in lieu fee is the in lieu fee. I mean, until you have 25 units, you're not going to build a affordable unit. I mean, there'd be absolutely no reason to, unless the rules change. So I think the practicality is without having a large high-density project of multiple acres. I think I was looking at if in the RM zone it would take just to handle our 212 units, would take around 16 acres of land. Just to take one site and do 100% low cost would require 16 acres. In the RM zone, it would require about 10 acres in the residential high zone. And I'm not aware of property available to accommodate that. So I think maybe for city council, they need to maybe have some consideration of working with, although Mission Viejo doesn't have an inclusionary housing ordinance, working on Area 8 that will come in the future in some time, to jointly use our fees to develop our housing, because all we have to do is stockpile the money and have a place to spend it. And I think that's probably, I don't know how long that's off, probably 15 years, something like that. So I think we need to get a little creative, because I just don't think the fabric of the city can produce this many affordable housing units. That's my comment.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Wu.
Yes, thank you. Right now we're in a hole. We have a deficit of a little over 200 affordable units. Starting from next year, this new RHNA number will be close to 1,000, because the old number is about 581. That means we're going to be in a deficit of about 600 plus minus for the next 8 years. Not to mention that some of the affordable agreement will expire. So if we want to catch up, it means for every year we need to produce plus minus 80 affordable units. We haven't seen that activity in the past decade. The affordable overlay zone has produced 2 affordable housing so far. So my comment is we need to revamp our development standards, especially for underutilized areas, such as just last planning commission meeting, we had an agenda to talk about some incentives for lot consolidation. And also some of the El Camino Real, for example, the South El Camino Real mixed use area. Some lots have been vacated for so long and there's a minimal activity there. So I think there's some opportunity to revamp our development standards to encourage the development of affordable housing. Whether we want to prefer in-lieu or on-site construction, we can talk about it later. But the bottom line is these two options need to be made equivalent in terms of the financial cost. Right now, we're charging 1% of the building construction cost. Not the construction cost data we're using is outdated, and that it's not considering the other costs such as the land development fees, etc. So, of course, everybody chooses to pay the in-lieu fee because that's to their advantage to maximize the profit. As the consultant shows that the profit is there to absorb a little more fees. I do understand that increase the fee, and if we abolish the construction cost-based fee instead of to use the subsidy-based fee. I'm looking at the last page of our housing element, C4, cost of affordable housing in lieu fee. That is based on the affordability gap, not based on the building cost. I believe at the beginning it was based on the affordability gap, but over the years they have diverged quite a lot, and we have updated the fee. That's why everybody chooses to pay the in-lieu fee, not to build anything on site. So I think for any large development, I don't know if we're going to have any large development anymore. There will be very limited number of them. But for those large-scale development, we should ask them to provide them on site. They can have this. For small projects, they will have to. It makes more sense to pay a in-lieu fee, but the in-lieu fee needs to be enough to cover the same cost of providing them on site or off site by a third party. And so that will make these three options or two options equivalent. Then we can tweak a little bit if we decide to favor in-lieu fee. I think that makes sense because we don't have large piece of land. So, for small projects, it's unpractical for asking them to provide an on-site unit if they are lower than 25 units. So, paying in-lieu fee is reasonable. At the same time, paying in-lieu fee, raise the in-lieu fee to say 10% is going to substantially increase the cost of housing development. So to offset that, we ought to look at options to reduce the regulation of the housing development in our town, especially, again, for those mixed use in an underutilized area. So that's my comment. Before we make these options equivalent, it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter if we raise it to 10% or 5 or 15 because no one is going to use that at 4%. They're going to pay a fee. They're going to pay a fee based on the construction cost, which is not sustainable. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kozinski.
I don't have any comments. I didn't.
I'm sorry. I saw your mute button off. My apologies. Councilmember James.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the neophyte question, but I need some clarification from staff on this. So, in regards to the inclusionary housing program, what is the consequence? What is the sanction, and from whom, if we don't meet these requirements? And I apologize if this is a tenderfoot question, but I need to understand that. Thank you.
Did one of the consultants want to answer that question?
Staff.
Or staff? I don't see.
Yeah.
I don't see Jennifer on right now. Or Gabriel, if you want to answer that, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman Rulon. Yeah. To answer that, it is the prerogative of the city to have that inclusionary housing requirement and the in lieu fee. It is one of the tools in our tool chest to be able to accommodate affordable housing, and it has been used to support affordable housing in the past. But there is no penalty, for a city not to have an inclusionary housing.
Did that help, Councilmember James?
Yes, that helped. So this is solely a voluntary program. I get it now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, this is Commissioner James, you're learning is a very complex subject, and the problem we've been dealing with for 7 or 8 years here, lawsuits, and how we got our housing element all tied up in POC, and so it's a very difficult issue, and particularly a difficult issue for a city that's built out. I think it's there's some good points made by Mark McGuire about we should be looking at some of our mixed-use areas. We need to harmonize probably the in lieu fee program with the zoning ordinance. We should probably retain this in lieu fee because it's one of the things in our toolbox which we can use financial leverage, which we did use for some of the recent project we did do, workforce house on Sierra and the senior housing down at Cotton's Point. And the point is we're really in a difficult bind here because we are built out. Some of the most difficult land use decisions planning use has made over the years is about 10 o'clock at night. Staff says we found some more properties we can put in the affordable housing overlay, and we're looking at a lot here and a lot there, maybe a consolidated lot here and there, and one empty lot that's barely buildable here. The one thing that got us across the finish line 4 or 5 years ago is we hawked our city hall. It's in the affordable housing overlay. Sell that, what you're trying to do now. HCD is going to remember that because it got us across the finish line. You're going to have to substitute something in lieu for that being sold. Just packed it with 38 houses per acre, or whatever it called for up there, even though the thing's sliding down the hill and couldn't afford that much density, but the HCD didn't know that, and it got us across the finish line. So the in lieu fee program is a tool in our box I think we have to retain. It's one of the few things available to us. I think we need to retool it. The actual formula is pretty simple and it's easy to derive and get at. I think we need to increase the cost of the fees, some reasonable sense. Some of the numbers we have here doesn't show sensitivity analysis, and I'd like to see the next time I see this to the contractor here, if you show me the methodology, you got these numbers. Our housing element uses family of 4, you use 3. So I'd like to have apples to apples comparisons and how you derive your number. But I think we should retool the in lieu fee program and probably broaden it. 6 unit or greater. Maybe we do a lot of condo conversion in this town that are 4 units. An existing apartment building, and they go to the city attorney and they fill out the paperwork, and we make it a condo. Maybe a 4-unit condo versus above should be expanded. Can we broaden it out and lower the total cost impact by broadening the base a little bit, and maybe certain individual houses pay still a 1% fee? That's another thing that should be looked at. In other words, broaden the base by expanding the population we look at. This problem's not going to go away for a build-out because what's coming out of Sacramento, we've had our auxiliary dwelling unit ordinance invalidated twice in the last 3 years, just now recently, and Jennifer and the staff are working on another update to that as we speak. And so this stuff is going to get draconian. It's going to, they almost eliminated residential housing zoning in the latest legislature. It came within a whisker of doing that, and pretty soon we're going to have to dense pack things around bus stops and everything else. So we kind of have to get ahead of this. As Sacramento tries to fix our issues in one size fits all, it's not going to get any prettier. So in lieu fees is a tool I feel we should retain. We can use that money as a leverage. That's how we did it with Cotton's Point and how we did it with Sarah Housing. And I think we should up the fee a little bit, keep the calculation simple like it is now so that everybody understands it, broaden the base of it a little bit, and have our consultant come back with that type of thing. And that's my recommendation. Same token, when you come back, show me how you got your numbers. Make it an apples comparison to our housing element that some of us on this commission worked on for the last 8 or 9 years with blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of tattoos and hard marks on our wrists. And so it's tough when you have your housing element in hock, it's HCD because of lawsuits. It's not pretty. Some of us have been there. So we need to get on with it, and that's my comments.
Thanks. And I'm going to jump in here. I've got a few questions. I think my first one's kind of a corollary to Council Member James' question. This is an optional program, so why do it? In years past, as we've looked at this, we've been told a number of good reasons to do it, like you have basically workforce housing, here in the city. So there's less traffic on the streets, lower commute times. People are able to spend many more hours with their family. There's more family cohesion. But I'm interested in hearing either from staff and or the consultants, maybe just a minute on, what are the motivations for us to have either an in lieu fee program or, for in terms of cash, or require building of a certain number of low cost units as from the builders themselves. So maybe you could give us a little overview for a moment.
Hi, this is Jennifer. I'll go ahead and start, and then if Darren or Julie want to jump in as well. So the reason that we would have an inclusionary housing program is to open up that opportunity to provide affordable units within the city. It's not a requirement, but it is a tool that we can use, a mechanism that we can encourage affordable units within the city. Without it, there may be other tools that we can use, such as the tool that Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson suggested, using the accessory dwelling unit. But you still don't get the number that you're, may not fully address the housing needs that San Clemente wants to see. And there are other tools that we can use, but the inclusionary housing in lieu fee would allow San Clemente to address their specific housing issues, such as the need for housing around homeless, perhaps, or senior housing, and perhaps even housing services.
Okay, thanks. And maybe too, if Darren or Julie, if you want to chime in, I'm kind of looking at, this is a voluntary program. The targets we have, we're not, as I understand it, we're not required to make. We're required to zone for it, but if we don't make the target, and nobody's hurt. But what is the value of making that target? What is the value of being, aggressive in terms of inclusionary housing to make that target? What would be the value for San Clemente?
Right. Well, I hear two different questions in your one. One is about affordable housing, period. Inclusionary housing is just one of the ways that communities address affordable housing. And so you're asking, what are the benefits to the community of having economically diverse housing options for residents? And typically, sure, there are the top-down legal requirements of zoning and to Mr. Brown's point, increasing pressure from the state to deliver Yes, historically it is true that all you've been required to do is to have sites that you've identified as having the opportunity to meet your affordable housing or your RHNA numbers. But certainly the trend at the state level has been toward more and more accountability for actually addressing those needs, not just zoning for them. But really, again, the broad arguments for affordable housing tend to be that it is a matter of increasing access to people who you need to have in your community in the first place, who may not earn as much money as is required for market rate housing. So, typically police and fire and teachers and first responders and things like that are cited as examples of the types of households who would benefit from programs like these. Perhaps they don't actually fall under the very low income category that your inclusionary housing policy addresses. They tend to be more in the low to moderate income categories. But that's one of the arguments that is made. And I just want to state for the record, my firm is not here to advocate for inclusionary housing. We are here to objectively run the numbers and tell you what we think is an appropriate equivalency and so forth, and a feasibility impact. So I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone being asked to defend inclusionary housing as an institution. But that said, the alternatives to inclusionary housing, if you agree that affordable housing is important, alternatives that cities take on, sometimes they have a commercial linkage fee where they charge retail and office and industrial development a fee to support housing for the employees of those new developments who may not be able to afford market rate housing. That's an alternative or a complement to an inclusionary housing policy. Another that's broader still is a parcel tax or otherwise creating a program that involves the entirety of your tax base that's contributing toward affordable housing. And some people see that as more equitable and fair rather than creating a burden on new construction. So there are a number of different ways to approach affordable housing if you think that that is an important goal for your community. Inclusionary housing is a tried and true way. We would not suggest that it has no economic impact on the feasibility of development. We have calculated that it does change the metrics of development. But by our estimations, and of course we will be providing more detail than is appropriate in a PowerPoint presentation in our final documentation or interim documentation, by our estimation, the inclusionary policy that you have now, or even something still greater in terms of the percentage of units that is comparable to other jurisdictions, is not likely to fully upset the apple cart of housing development in San Clemente. So I'm hopeful that that's a broad enough response to your question, but I'm happy to take on more if you'd like.
No, that helps. Thank you.
Chair Rowland, this is Cecilia. Chair Rowland, this is Cecilia Gallardo-Daly. If I could just jump in here as well, thank you. As Gabriel mentioned, an inclusionary housing program is a tool in the city's toolbox for affordable housing. We're kicking off the preparation of the housing element for the next housing element cycle, and the inclusionary housing program has been in the housing element for a number of years and in a number of cycles, and I think it has benefited the city in convincing HCD that we can try and plan and accommodate affordable housing in our community. One of the challenges that we had with the last housing element is an adequate amount of sites in the city available for just new development. And, as I think Commissioner Brown alluded to, it's been tough because the sites that are
available and left to build on are constrained lots or substandard lots. So I do have concerns that HCD might look at not having an inclusionary housing program as something that could be a challenge for the city in trying to implement overall affordable housing goals. And I'm going to have my staff look into this some more, but there's been some recent legislation that has been passed in Sacramento and signed by the governor that does impose penalties on jurisdictions who don't meet their RHNA numbers. So I would like to provide that information to the council and the commission as well. And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, I was having some audio challenges a bit ago, so I apologize. I couldn't answer your question directly, but we do count ADUs in our affordable housing inventory.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. And I know Bart mentioned about the ADUs. They are they tend to be a onesie twosie kind of thing. But I think we're going to be scraping, the bottom of the barrel. We're probably going to be looking for everyone that we can find. So I think we want to consider ADUs. There may be ways that we can do things like sort of bulk up if 10 owners want to do 10 ADUs, and they can come to us with that, and maybe we can help with some kind of subsidy if they're going to be guaranteed to be low income. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but maybe we want to look at those types of ideas and leveraging ADUs for that. And there could be a run on ADUs in the years to come. We shall see. And just to check my assumption in terms of costs of this, if we have a developer and encourage a developer to actually build an affordable unit as part of their project, once that's done, it's done. We have the affordable unit. It's no cost to the city. If we do an in lieu fee, that's some kind of cost to the city, correct? There's staff time, there's management of that, there's, I don't know, even a potential risk of a lawsuit depending on what we get involved in for a future project. Am I correct about that, or is that cost trivial?
That's correct. But doing the in lieu fee does require some administration costs. But the same could also be said for requiring the units on site, given that the city is required to produce an affordable housing agreement that would solidify how long a unit has to be affordable and at what level. So there are administration costs on both sides, but you are leaning towards you are correct in leaning towards the inclusionary housing in lieu fee, the actual collection and administration of that being a little bit higher.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So that's what I had for now. Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a very interesting discussion here as we talk about fees versus increased density in the city, whether it be additional fees to allow additional folks to come in and reside. We still have another piece of this, and this is getting back to Councilperson Ward's statement about hitting our upper limit. And so we've got infrastructure strain to consider. We've got lots of things to consider that are just beyond the envelope of a dwelling unit. It's how folks are going to use the space in our town, how congestion would be impacted, how other uses would be impacted. So that's just something to consider. I just want to put it out there. I think this is something that if it's a RHNA number that's been established for us, whether it's X today and X next year, it's still a number that we are going to have we're going to have our maximum capacity. You can only fit so much into a pair of hands, period. And until you start to detrimentally, impact the, folks that visit and live in a community. So definitely an important discussion, definitely a high bar right now, the way Sacramento is talking. But one question I have for Julie or Darren, maybe Julie, you had a lot of stats. I'm interested, the Fed the last week made a comment about, the chairman made a comment about, had announced that the central bank would no longer treat inflation as a primary indicator to gauge economic growth. And I'm wondering, in these models that we're looking at, it's just one piece of it, but how much of this math has been factored by using inflation? And could that potentially, start to change a trend for our for arena numbers alone? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say, simply regarding our model, it's really a static pro forma, so it's not as the factoring in inflation is not as much of a concern. At least, we're thinking about, a unit developed today, today's cost, today's revenues, rents. Darren, I don't know if you have any kind of more macro thoughts about that, but in this particular case, I would say wouldn't make a big difference in our analysis.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Yes, the math that we've done is meant to reflect as close to contemporary market conditions on both the cost and value side as we can. But that said, inflation has been a huge part of the increasing cost to develop affordable housing throughout the state, not only in Orange County, but everywhere. And by and large, the construction cost inflation has outpaced income growth, and that has been a major contributor to an ever widening subsidy required for affordable housing. So in that sort of retrospective sense, our numbers are informed by a history of inflation on the construction cost side that in most cases had very little to do with impact fees or regulations at the local level. It has to do with labor and materials, and those have gone up very rapidly since the previous recession, and that has affected housing development feasibility throughout the state.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember James.
So I guess I have a concern as it relates to this, and I'm just going to have to wrap my head around it. It just feels like inclusionary housing is tinkering with market forces. It feels very planned economy to me. And I was just wondering if Mr. Smith or his colleague have done any studies as it relates on how, I may be looking at this wrong, but how inclusionary housing then impacts the property values of non-inclusionary housing.
We have not conducted such a study ourselves. We have been asked that question before, and I've done a literature review of it a couple of times to search for that kind of data, and have not found a sort of scientifically valid type of study with econometrics and all that other stuff. It tends to be sort of anecdotal, and there's anecdotal evidence on both sides that it has done very little, and in fact been a gain to communities to have affordable housing of whatever sort, and others that suggest otherwise. But I haven't seen anything that I would consider authoritative as a sort of longitudinal study of those impacts. But it's an interesting question, and we would be glad to take that on for you.
Thank you very much.
With an amendment to our scope and budget, of course.
Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Oh, thank you, Chair Rulon. Just briefly, in response to Councilmember James, I live just a few blocks up the street from the Mendocino low-income housing, affordable housing. There's almost 200 units, but I know for certain it hasn't impacted property values at all. We have high property values, and it's just literally a few blocks down the street. So that's my observation. I just wanted to contribute because that's a pretty big complex of almost 200 units. It's been fine for our property values, at least subjective, I guess, input.
Is it still under the affordable housing overlay? I mean, after 20 years, did it clock out, or is it market rate now?
It's still affordable housing. It is in Mendocino, yes. So there's 3 tiers, I believe, 3 units and 3 tiers of income. I just don't have that at the top of my head right now. Jamboree Housing, I believe, maybe the consultants would know. Wasn't it Jamboree Housing that had built that?
Yes, that's correct. That's Jamboree's project.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Brown, I was going to call on you next.
Okay, fine. Patiently waiting. I think we're running quite a ways here, and I know you guys, the council members, had a long night last night with some 80 emails on Rod's trees and a few other things, so I know you're tired. I think this inclusionary housing is one tool in our toolbox as we go forward, and as Cecilia mentioned, we have our housing element coming due next year after a long bloody history of that in the last 10 years. We're going to need every tool in our toolbox we can get to make everything work. So I think inclusionary housing has to stay. I think it needs to be improved. I think it needs to be looked at as far as upping the rate, keeping the formula constant, widening it out to maybe including more people so the costs get lower or amortized over a greater type part of the populace. If I was to give you guidance, and I don't know, I defer to the council members on this, but because we're going to need it. And you look at our housing element, it's like one chapter in the entire housing element. And this next housing element update is going to be a steep hill to climb. We're working on some stuff coming out of Sacramento from the last session that Jennifer said to us. It's coming to you as a zoning ordinance change. City council members, stand by. It's really light reading with a nice coat of industrial oil on it to make the pages turn easier. The subject's not going to get easier. And so I think we need to improve this. We need to tweak it. We need to do sensitivity analysis on it. I think we need to get the methodology provided to us on your next go-around, Aaron and company, so that we increase the program, but we don't kill the goose that lays the golden. We have to make sure it balance it properly. We need to go to 10 or 15%, whatever. Maybe we need to more mirror image our own zoning ordinance desires, possibly. And I think that's kind of the guidance that I've been willing to offer to you as far as moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Krasinski, I don't see your mute on, but I don't know if you want to speak, but I wanted to ask you just in case.
Oh, thank you for asking, but I'm fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wu.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Darren, Cecilia, and Commissioner Brown's comments, and hopefully I can answer some of the questions Councilmember James has. Regardless if we have inclusionary housing program in the housing element or not, the city still needs to address affordable housing problem. The RHNA requirement is there, and it's in our general plan to provide affordable housing, and we need to make the policy to accommodate them. The benefit of having the affordable housing adequately addressed is, first of all, we will have a complete general plan. A couple of years ago, we had a lawsuit based on the SB2 overlay. Eventually, the city leveraged a certified housing plan to let the court to drop that injunction. So it is important to have a complete or updated housing plan. Secondly, as Commissioner Brown suggested, the state is very aggressive to address affordable housing issues statewide. It's a statewide concern. as a result, the state has passed numerous new laws to take local controls away from the cities. So, in the worst case, the state can sue a city. Huntington Beach is an example, Malcolm Chiming, if you will. And then, at the minimum, they can withdraw some CBDG grant money from the state. So those are the consequences of not having affordable housing issue addressed adequately. Regarding the ADU will help to fill some of the gap of affordable housing, but ADU is not being considered a very low income housing, which is the biggest gap we have, or low income. They probably, my belief is they will meet the moderate income affordable housing unit requirement, but not the low and very low. So in summary, I believe the city needs to take a more proactive or conciliatory approach to address this problem. And the inclusionary housing elements should stay and not be abandoned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that it was very interesting, some of the comments that I heard. I agree with Bart Crandall that I think it would be interesting. Rancho Mission Viejo, Area 8. I don't believe they have a plan for that area yet. It's very much in flux. It is a ways off, but maybe we should have some talks with Rancho Mission Viejo and propose some of that, because maybe it would help San Juan Capistrano and San Clemente reach our housing goals. And I don't know, they might be willing to take a look at that, because that Area 8's a little tricky. We are in the process right now of allowing or looking at favorably an extension for Area 5 to come to La Plata, an arterial, and I think that's helping Rancho Mission Viejo very much with their building of Area 5. So maybe it's something that we can talk to them about. I do agree that we need to look at the fee because it's not keeping up with market rate, but I am very concerned that it would only be charged to new construction only. So I think we should see how we could broaden it, give us some examples, and then we need to know what that might do to some of the building in our city. Because what we've tried to do with our housing is add more on El Camino Real. That would be very sensitive to any of the normal incentives like density. And relax the parking. And so I think that it'd be difficult to do to get more units in there along El Camino. I don't know how that could be done. So I think we need to look at that. But so I agree. I think we need to keep the tool, but we really do need to look at what our options are as far as increasing it and how we would do that. Because I think it can only we're not going to get very much money, and we can't base everything on just 4 to 6 units that are coming, because I don't think we're going to get there either. So I think all the comments that I heard so far were good. The one thing that I worry about is I think that this needs to be tailored to San Clemente more, and I don't know that we should be looking at overall Orange County. I don't know if that would change some of the assumptions, but if it's our inclusionary housing fee, why can't we look at our city more organically to where it works for us? Because I have an issue trying to charge someone for something that we may not be able to build any, or build very few. That's what I'm concerned with. I see Darren has his hand up.
Please, Darren.
A literal hand up this time. So there are communities that the standard with respect to this county question is that HCD assigns income levels on a county by county basis and affordability standards on a county by county basis. There are communities that have understood that but decided to look at their own local demographics and create an inclusionary housing policy that is more tailored to their own jurisdiction. So, for example, that can go either way. I'm thinking now of the city of Watsonville in Santa Cruz County, or Monterey County, I forget which now. But their local incomes are lower than the average for their county, and so they wanted to have their inclusionary housing policy meet still lower standards. So the nominal 50% of median income or 80% of median income at the county level was actually, they wanted 40%. And 60%, for example, because that's more of the folks who lived in their community. And you could change that to go the other way too, if you felt that there was a need for affordable housing, that market rate pricing was still not attainable for even folks making moderate income or even above moderate income. There are an increasing number of communities, particularly in coastal zone communities, that are looking at above moderate income households as still needing support and financial subsidy to attain housing. And so again, you are not burdened by an expectation that you meet the county's standards with your inclusionary housing policy, but the RHNA numbers still are based on those county standards. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want those to align, or if you don't, it would be a distinction that would be drawn between the RHNA qualification versus what you might choose to do with your inclusionary policy.
And if I can also make one comment, and this is sort of based on some conversations that I had with affordable housing developers in the city. Part of the benefit of these funds is that affordable housing developers can leverage them with other sources of funding, such as federal housing tax credits. The standards that those programs require are also generally need to be aligned with these county standards for affordability. So that's another thing you just want to consider. It becomes a challenge for the affordable housing developer if they don't have the funds that they need to provide the price of housing that is required by these programs.
Thank you. Commissioner Crandall.
Yes, we've heard it from the planning side. I'd like to recommend that we invite Jamboree Development, who offer a free service of talking. They're low-cost housing specialists, and provide a free service of coming and talking to jurisdictions and saying how they look at projects, etc., as an educational tool for everyone here tonight. And see if either Cecilia, Gabriel, or the City Council would accept the idea of having them come talk to us and give us the developer side of the story, and how maybe we need to know more intricacies of what they do to really come up with a final solution for this.
Chairman Rulin, this is Gabriel Perez, City Planner. Just something I want to add to that. We have met with Jamboree a few months ago, actually, just asking some of these questions. And, they are interested in developing affordable housing in the city. I think one of the biggest questions they have is, how receptive is the City Council to affordable projects coming in? I think that's how they assess if they're going to come into a city. I think they definitely are welcome to do that and share information on, what will work and what won't work for them to come in and build in the city. And they do come with funding that comes from other sources. And, my understanding, they would, request to leverage some of the funding that we have from our inclusionary fees to be able to build in the city. But they are a resource, and they have expressed interest in being able to share more information with city officials.
Okay, great. Councilmember Ward.
So I
Something you
propose
wanna-
another study session, another joint study session with a presentation by Jamboree. I think it's a good suggestion. We need to understand what they actually want to do, and we can figure out what the limitations would be for our city. I mean, they might have some suggestions.
I agree with Councilmember Ward. In fact, I was going to mention, I think this joint study session has been proven to be really helpful, certainly to me. It's the council that ultimately decides on the policy, but it's good to be involved as that thinking is happening. And so we can all sort of be on the same page and understand where we're going together. So I think this has been helpful, and I think that I agree with Councilmember Ward's recommendation that we have another joint session to talk to, as Bart said, the Jamboree organization. I will say, after hearing, sort of processing, what I've heard so far, I do think that we need to be a little more aggressive with our low-cost housing. There's a lot of reasons. Potential state penalties that may be coming up is not the least of it. I think it's good for business. Every community needs a low-cost workforce for a certain segment of the businesses that go on, and the farther away that workforce has to travel, the more expensive it is for that workforce, and it drives up the cost. So I kind of think it's good for everybody. And as I've been listening to this, I'm kind of thinking where we probably need to be a lot more aggressive, given how far we are from this goal and potential penalties we might end up seeing. So I kind of like, at least for now, looking at an all of the above type of strategy. If we can get a big 25 unit project coming in somehow, maybe a tear down or something like that, that would be great. I think that we should look at, incrementally getting whatever we can, whether that's, ADUs or some other method of getting onesies, twosies that over time might get us some hundreds of units, even if it's a low number of units per year. I kind of like the idea of encouraging building, having the builders who are building regular units, encouraging them to do units, just because once it's done, it's done. Otherwise, if they pay an in lieu fee, then that money is sitting around for a year or 10 years, kind of waiting to be put to use and do some good in the community. If a builder builds something instead, it's put to use and it's good in the community now and for the next 10 years. We kind of get a lot more years of use, you might say, out of that investment that the builder is making in the community. So I'm sure we can't get all the way to where we need to be with just that, but doing things, perhaps raising the in lieu fees or doing other sorts of carrots for the builders to encourage them to do that might be something that we want to consider in a future study session as well. So those are kind of my final thoughts. I don't see anyone else who has their button on. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Brown. You had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I've been waiting patiently. Couple items or comments. Both Bart and Kathy have made allusions to the ranch, and they're going to sit there and look at you and say, geez, thanks for coming. Planning Area 8 is kind of in our sphere of influence. We have not taken any action via LAFCO to put it in our sphere of influence, which does not obligate us to, in fact, incorporate. They're not going to be serious about us until we put it in our sphere of influence and we get a seat at the table. And it would be a great thing to say, HCD, we got this big development, we should get with them, that I make this a long-range thing in the future, but we've got to do some preparation there before we make that viable. I'm agreeing with Jim and everybody else. We need all the above in our toolbox. My street right now is 3 blocks long. 3 lots have been scraped for redevelopment. They're not saving a wall. They've scraped them. And that's 3 lots that's going to be residential housing. And maybe each one of those lots should pay a nick $300, $400, $500 small. There's a lot of fees in this town, but that's where you're going to get a lot of infill there, along with, because we may work mixed use on El Camino Route or affordable housing overlay. All those we're working at the margin, and we need everything in our toolbox, along with what's coming down from Sacramento, because it's going to get draconian in the next couple of years as we really rezone for density. So, as far as our housing element in general and this small subset to it, this needs to be improved and increased within reason. And I think, but it needs to be broadened out. That's all we have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to this discussion before we move on to the next item in our agenda? All right, then. We'll move on to item 2, which is oral communications. Members of the public who wish to provide comments to Council/Planning Commission on matters that are within the jurisdiction of the City of San Clemente, but not separately listed on the agenda, may email forward for reading during the oral communication portion of the agenda. Transmittal by 4 p.m. on the meeting date is recommended. Emails will be read publicly at the meeting up to the allotted time of 3 minutes per person. Do we have any oral communications for items that are not on this agenda?
I'll have to refer. Go ahead, Laura.
I've not received any public comments for oral communication.
Very good.
Hey,
yes.
Jim, hello. May I interrupt, please? If we're going into the commission agenda, should we close the study session and open the planning?
Yes, actually, there's a way we have to do it because council, this is our next item, council needs to do a proper recess and then we can adjourn to our regular meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I got that right, Joanne, did I?
Yes, the Planning Commission will recess now to your own regular meeting and council will adjourn.
Very good. Then I will recess the Planning Commission to our regular meeting, which will occur immediately after this meeting ends. And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, I don't know if would you like to adjourn the City Council meeting?
Certainly. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the City Council meeting.
Second.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I was going to say to September 15th, 2020. Thank you. And Jean seconded the motion. Let's go ahead and take a vote. Councilwoman Ward?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember James?
Aye.
And I believe Councilmember Ham is absent, and so Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson's aye, so that passes 3 to 1. I'm sorry, 3 to 0 to 1 being absent. Thank you. Great job tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the discussion.
Thank you very much, staff and City Council and Planning Commission and planning staff. Please stay on and we'll start our meeting immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Brown, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Certainly. Put your hands over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you for those that could get on and actually talk and unmute, and we appreciate it. And Chair Rulon, take it away.
Thank you. Gabriel, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner Kuczynski?
Here.
Commissioner Crandall?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Wu?
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwell?
Here.
And Chair Rulon?
Here. Item 4 on our agenda. Before we do our minutes, we have a Cultural Heritage Board special presentation regarding the North Beach Historic District. So Jennifer, did you want to cover this for us? Jennifer, are you there?
You know what? Let me
She
see.
might have.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry about
no
that.
worries. No worries. I didn't see it show up here. Did you want to take us through the North Beach Historic District presentation?
Almost. I would like to introduce GPA Consulting, who has been the consultant on this effort, and they will give us a background of what we've done and where we're going. And tonight we have with us Allison, Amanda, and Audrey. And I'm not sure if all three of them are on, but I will turn it over to GPA Consulting. Thank you.
Okay, does someone from GPA Consulting like to take over?
They are joining now.
Okay, very good.
And while we have...
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you're a little quiet, but we can hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can turn my volume up or the microphone up. One moment. Is that a little better?
That's all right. I can hear you.
All right. Okay, so thank you, committee members, for inviting us to speak about the North Beach project today. My name is Audrey Von Ahrens, and I'm an architectural historian at GPA Consulting. Do we have the presentation ready to share? Oh, great. Thank you. So as I was saying, I'm an architectural historian at GPA Consulting. We are an environmental consulting firm that specializes in historic preservation, and we're hired by the city to nominate the North Beach Historic District to the National Register. Next slide, please. The goal of designating the district was not regulatory in nature, but rather it was to enhance historic and cultural awareness of this historic northern gateway to the city. Although there is significant visitor traffic to the public beach, visitors serving businesses, and the Metrolink station within North Beach, its history goes largely unnoticed by most. Through National Register listing of the North Beach Historic District, the city hopes to encourage appreciation of its history and continued investment and preservation, as well as rehabilitation of its historic resources. In addition to the district nomination, the city also tasked GPA to create options to enhance signage and informational programming within the district to further identify the significance of the area and its buildings to both residents and visitors alike. My colleague, Amanda Duane, will speak about the signage in the second half of the presentation. Next slide, please. We began the project with a review of existing documentation. Several previous studies and surveys identified the district as eligible for listing in the National Register and under the local historic preservation ordinance. The district was first identified as a potential National Register district in 2009 as part of a citywide historic resources survey. After reviewing previous research, GPA conducted additional research to fill information gaps, such as chronology of alterations and current property owner information. We consulted primary sources such as historic aerial imagery as well as books and articles. And we also reached out to individuals and groups in the community to provide information about the history as well. Another aspect of the project included a walking tour and site visit where photographs were taken. This was done back in March. GPA used all of the prior documentation, existing context statements, and the site visit data to prepare the National Register nomination form. Next slide, please. The National Register of Historic Places is the official list of places significant in our country's history. Nominating the North Beach Historic District to the National Register ensures that an important piece of San Clemente's history is documented and recognized nationally as an important historic place. The nomination form will be the official documentation of the district. and it includes a narrative description and a statement of significance, as well as photographs, including both present-day and historic photographs, as well as location maps. Next slide, please. GPA concluded that the North Beach Historic District is eligible at the local level of significance under criterion A in the area of community planning and development, as well as entertainment and recreation. In our nomination, we described the North Beach Historic District as encompassing buildings at the historic northern entrance to San Clemente from El Camino Real. The nomination goes on to describe the history of the district. And as you know, San Clemente was founded in 1925 as one of the first new master planned towns in California. City founder Ole Hansen envisioned North Beach as the recreational and entertainment center of the city. And he built the Ole Hansen Beach Club and had plans for parks, gardens, lagoons, and a dance pavilion. By 1947, the properties comprising the district were referred to as the amusement center. And as you can see from this image on the left in 1927, that's the original published plan for the area. Therefore, the period of significance was established to extend from 1927, the year of the original plan, to 1946, which was the year the last major building was constructed in the district. And that was the bowling alley, which is outlined in orange, which in 1941 wasn't yet constructed. And next slide, please. The district developed from the 1920s to the 1950s and is as an exclusively commercial area. Additional tourist and auto-oriented development along El Camino Real included a motel and a restaurant, Boyd and Francis. Both of these buildings are lost and are no longer with us today, but there are many buildings of San Clemente's iconic historic buildings remain. Next slide, please. The nomination form includes a long narrative description of the district. This section describes the historic and current physical appearance and condition of the properties within the district and clarifies which buildings are contributing or non-contributing resources. For the purposes of the National Register district, North Beach refers to a roughly triangular area where El Camino Real, the city's primary east-west commercial corridor, curves northward and runs parallel to the coastline. Most of the properties within the district include surface parking lots and landscaped open space, as you can see from the aerial photograph here. Next slide. The historic district is specifically comprised of one previously designated building, being the Ole Hansen Beach Club, and 4 contributing buildings. These include a restaurant, now OC Frescas, and originally the Aquarium Cafe, the Casino San Clemente, the Miramar Theater, originally the San Clemente Theater, and the San Clemente Bowling Alley. The contributing buildings are all 1 and 2 stories in height and Spanish colonial revival in style. All of the contributing buildings have an east-west orientation such that they are visible by people approaching from the coastline by rail or from inland by car, as was the case historically. All of these buildings remain substantially unaltered today. The district also includes non-contributing buildings. The non-contributing buildings are within the district boundaries, but do not contribute to the significance of the district. These include 3 commercial buildings along North El Camino Real and a pump station at the south corner of Avenida Estacion. These buildings were included in the boundary because the street pattern conveys a clear sense that they are part of the distinct commercial area. They have the same commercial use and small scale as those that existed historically in the same locations. However, they were all constructed outside the period of significance. Next slide, please. The boundary seeks to capture the visually distinct area with low density commercial, entertainment, and recreational development that generally corresponds to the area planned by Ole Hansen. Next slide, please. So for our timeline and next steps, GPA submitted a draft nomination to the State Office of Historic Preservation in May. The final version of the nomination will actually be posted on OHP's website this Friday, September 4th. And the State Historical Resources Commission will then review the nomination at its next meeting on November 6th. Before this meeting, OHP will notify all applicants, property owners, and appropriate governmental groups that this nomination is being considered by the SHRC. The nomination will be included on the consent calendar, meaning that OHP supports the nomination and thinks the property should be listed without further discussion. This would be unless a letter of opposition is submitted, in which case it will be pulled from the calendar for further discussion and general public comment. If approved by the SHRC, the nomination is then sent to the National Park Service. The final determination is made approximately 45 days after receipt by the keeper, which would put us at around December 21st. Next slide, please. Listing on the National Register is first and foremost an honorific recognition and will add prestige to the area. Listing also has the following effects for historic properties. At the federal level, properties have special consideration in planning for federally licensed and federally assisted projects. There is an eligibility for certain tax provisions when funds are available. In this case, owners of properties listed in the National Register may be eligible for a 20% investment tax credit for the certified rehabilitation of income-producing certified historic structures and qualify for federal grants for historic preservation. Next slide, please. Another frequently asked question is, what are the restrictions, rules, and regulations for historic property owners? The short answer is none. Under federal law, the listing of a property in the National Register places no restrictions on what a non-federal owner may do with their property, up to and including destruction. And this would be unless federal assistance is received. Next slide, please. The same goes for under state and City of San Clemente ordinances, under which listing of the North Beach Historic District on the National Register would also introduce no changes. The Historic District would not function as a regulatory mechanism, as we stated earlier. The city's existing historic preservation ordinance already regulates contributing and non-contributing properties within local district boundaries and requires design review for any future development and review for any impacts under CEQA in the area. As stated earlier, the goal of the district nomination and designation is less regulatory in nature and is more focused on enhancing historic and cultural awareness. By listing the district, the city hopes to encourage appreciation of the history of North Beach and continued investment in preservation and rehabilitation of its historic resources. In addition to the district nomination, the city was also interested in considering options to enhance the signage and informational programming opportunities within the district to further identify the significance of the area and its buildings to residents and visitors. My colleague, Amanda Duane, will now speak about the signage and postcard program. Next slide, please.
Hello, this is Amanda Duane. So the City of San Clemente identified the creation of postcards as another method to help raise public awareness and appreciation for the North Beach District. GPA collaborated with the Planning Division and the San Clemente Historical Society to create a series of 6 postcards. Next slide, please. The GPA team designed these postcards and created the front image by colorizing early photos from the Historical Society's holdings. This design is an homage to the brightly colored postcards that were popular in the early 20th century. On the back, the postcards include a short description of the building shown as well as its significance. The end goal is to display and potentially sell these postcards at local businesses, especially those within the district, for residents and visitors to enjoy and send to others. This creates an appealing and approachable way to share information about the district. This slide shows one of the 6 images and a sample of how the back appears. On the next few slides, we have the images of the other postcards as well as their descriptions. Next slide, please. We can just stay on the slides for a few moments to let people read. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in addition to the postcards, GPA also assisted, oh, sorry, can you go back one more? Thank you so much. So in addition to the postcards, GPA also assisted the city toward their goal of raising public awareness by identifying some historically compatible options for a signage program. These signs or plaques are intended to be visibly posted within the district boundaries in order to inform passersby of its significance. Staff will be presenting these options to the Cultural Heritage Review Subcommittee next week, and to complete our work on this project, GPA will assist staff with signage selection and its future implementation through the month of September. This concludes our formal presentation, but Audrey and I would be happy to welcome any comments or questions that the committee may have.
It's great. Thank you very much. I'll ask the commission, does anyone have any questions or comments for the presenters? Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I guess seeing as being fed to the state, have you had any feedback from the State Office of Historical Preservation? I know it's going to go through this hearing probably in November, but have you had any feedback? Does it look okay to them, or is there some other tweaks or things in the office?
Yes, this is Audrey Von Ahrens. So in short, the draft the nomination is always submitted to OHP as a draft, and they provide any revisions. We did have one RFI, so they did request some small changes, nothing very substantial. It was mostly just text edits. So at this point, after we make that first revision, it's resubmitted, and then OHP actually takes the draft and finalizes it themselves. So at this point, we haven't heard anything else. It should be good to go, and we should see the final nomination on Friday.
So it's eminent, in other words, huh?
Yes.
And any other feedback from the registration form you filled out? I have a copy of that. I guess when I was designing the subcommittee. Have you fed this to the federal side at all, or are we all just waiting to get through the state system before we move out?
Correct. So once we submit it to the state actually takes over from there, and they're the ones who actually send it to the keeper.
I know you filled out the form. I have a copy of it here, right on the city email system today. I saw it before in the design subcommittee. But so any feedback from that at all? Is it the state's fed this national park certification form is okay to go, or are the state still working at it, or pretty well answer the mail for whatever questions they have?
At this point, it should be finalized. Yes, there are no more they will not have any other questions unless the only thing that could happen at this point is once they do send the letters to the property owners, the property owners do have a chance to submit any questions or concerns.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wu?
Yes, just a simple question. Building number 3, casino, number 4, theater, and number 6, the commercial building, former Kelani Coffee, they're all undergoing rehabilitation. Do we need to update those?
So the nomination only reflects the current condition when the nomination was drafted. So the date of the form, any changes thereafter would not be incorporated.
They're not required.
Correct.
I had a question or two. There is a historic property, a residential property across the street from the casino that's not included in the triangle. Is the reason it's not included because you chose only to have commercial buildings included, or is there another reason?
Yes, so a district is defined as, it's clearly defined and has to be cohesive in use or visual coherency. So because the nomination is specifically for it's under criterion A, commercial development and entertainment, the residents wouldn't actually be wouldn't qualify as a contributor.
That's interesting. And so it sounds like the boundaries really could never change because this is kind of what they were at the beginning, and like that. Is that an accurate assumption?
The boundaries of the designated district, correct. They could eventually be amended, but because it is specifically under criterion A, it is unlikely that it would be changed. It's kind of a natural boundary. It does reflect the original plan from 1927 and commercial development that occurred since.
Okay. And I think you answered this question in the presentation, but it's been a question in my mind for a long time about this. So I'm just going to make sure that I understand it. This is not going to add any additional regulatory burdens to those historic structures. It's not going to add any additional burdens to structures that are close to those structures beyond what we have now. So the city says, you want to do something to your building, you're 300 feet from one of these historic structures, you've got to get a minor cultural heritage permit. That sort of thing doesn't change as a result of this. There's no extra burden anyone's taking on unless they choose to get federal funds or for something, right?
That's absolutely correct, yes. The National Register listing, there's no regulatory restrictions. It's truly honorific recognition.
Okay, great, thank you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions or comments about this item? All right, well, thank you very much. Gabriel, do we need to make a motion to accept and file this, or is it just a presentation? And we don't need to take any particular action. Or Jennifer?
Jennifer, I think this is just a presentation and no action is needed on this, right?
That's correct.
Great. And by the way, I love the postcards. They're great. Thanks for including them in my packet. So.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun to design them with the city.
Good. All right. Well, it sounds like that's it for this issue then. Thank you so much for coming in and delivering that presentation to us.
Thank you for having us. Good night.
Good night. Next item 5, we have minutes, 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is the minutes from the regular study session of August 19th, 2020. Are there any requests for changes or motion?
I'll move we approve the regular study session from August 19th.
Second?
Kuczynski seconds.
Motion by Brown, second by Kaczynski. I will call the roll. Commissioner Brown? Yes or no?
Aye.
Commissioner Kaczynski?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Aye.
And Rulon votes aye, passes unanimously. We also have the minutes from the regular Planning Commission meeting of August 19th, 2020. Is there changes or a motion?
Yeah, I have a change I'd like to make.
Okay.
So on page 8, toward the bottom, for the short paragraph saying raising a point of personal privilege, I'd like to revise it. First of all, I did not say personal. I'd like to take that personal word out. It's actually a point of order, but I did say privilege, so I leave it as is. After privilege, I'd like to add a phrase to continue the discussion. Really, the point of order was that I should be allowed to continue the discussion. The next sentence is the contents of the discussion. So it will read this way: raise a point of privilege to continue the discussion, comma, Chair Pro Tem, and so on.
I don't think I understand exactly what that means. It seems to be a sentence fragment.
What it means, the point of order I raised, I misused the term. I said a point of privilege. The order I raised is that I should be allowed to continue the discussion because that motion was debatable. And there was no motion to move the question yet. There was no motion to limit the debate. And you did allow me to continue, so I made my comments. So the point of order is actually, let me to continue the discussion. Does that make sense? Raise a point of a privilege to continue the discussion.
That is that's not my recollection, so I don't think I could support that, but I'm sorry, Commissioner Brown?
I just don't understand what he's trying to say. I don't remember how we're going to go through this.
Commissioner Crandall, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was waiting for the roll call on this. But I would say that, if he wants to say it, we could approve it with the caveat that that line reflect exactly what's on the video and or audio records, because I don't remember it, so I can't.
We can have staff to review the video.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and maybe it needs a review.
Yeah.
I don't know what went on, or can't remember.
So,
I reviewed the video,
so is your request that staff review the video and we'll continue this item? We'll continue these minutes till the next meeting?
if you so choose.
If you
revise,
I'm asking you. I'm just trying to find out what you want. So
I want to revise it as I just said. But if you don't feel comfortable to support it, then we can have the staff to review the video, bring it back next meeting.
That's fine with me. I can't support your change because it's not my recollection, and I'm not sure I quite understand what the sentence, what you're trying to get at in the sentence. It seems like a sentence fragment. So I would have no problem with continuing this item and asking staff to take a look at this and clarify your statements. I can support that.
Sure.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So I move the rest, with accepting that the staff review the video in response to my request, and I'll bring that portion next to Planning Commission meeting.
Can we, Gabriel? Can we? I've never done that before. Is move a portion of the minutes and not the rest of the minutes. Is that the normal order?
I've never done that before. I mean, I would recommend us continuing the entirety of the minutes and for us to review the video and bring it back to the Planning Commission. Unless Mel has anything else to add that would be different from that.
All right,
I think that's right.
My motion and I make a new motion that we continue this item to the next Planning Commission meeting.
And request that staff review your comments on privilege.
I'd like to hear from the city attorney, please.
I'm sorry, Mal, could you repeat what you said?
No, I was just going to say that I agree with Gabriel that if we're going to bring this back, the entire thing should come back after a review by staff, and not just a portion.
So let me, if I could, Commissioner, we'll make a recommendation, and I'll make a motion, and you can feel free to reject this. Then I'll move that we continue this item, continue these minutes to our next meeting, and request between then and now, request that staff review the comments you made on your point of privilege and revise that paragraph as appropriate.
Again,
Does that work for you?
I seconded it.
Okay, motion by Rulon, second by Wu. Call the roll. Commissioner Brown?
No.
No. Commissioner Kozinski?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Aye.
And Rulon votes aye, passes 5-1. Okay, next item on the agenda. Oral and written communications. Members of the public may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on the agenda. Speakers can submit their comments on agenda items to the Planning Commission electronically. Material may be emailed to scott.m1@san-clemente.org. Transmittal by 3 p.m. on Planning Commission meeting days is recommended. The Planning Commission is not permitted to discuss or take action on items that do not appear on the agenda. Gabriel, do we have any communications from the public that are not on the agenda?
Chairman, we've received no communications for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next item is consent calendar. We have nothing. Item 8, public hearings. We have none. Item 9, new business. Is there any new business to bring up? Seeing none. Item 10, old business. We have none. Item 11, reports of commissioners and staff. Does anyone have any reports?
Chairman, this is Gabriel Perez, City Planner. So we have Jonathan Lightfoot on the line, our Economic Development Officer, and it's related to the presentation earlier on the North Beach Historic District. There were some recent work completed, some demo work related to the rehabilitation of the Miramar Theater, and Jonathan's going to be able to speak to that. The other thing I just want to commend Jonathan on is he was the person that prepared the grant for the Historic District too, so he should be commended, even though he is not necessarily taking this to the finish line. He did a lot of the work on this project, and you know it's going to be a real gem for the future of the city. So I just want to acknowledge him for that work, and he'll give his update.
Great, please, Jonathan.
Hello, Commissioners. Good evening. I just wanted to mainly give a status update on that project since it's of particular interest to the Planning Commission and obviously the city as a whole. Where we are currently, there's a few kind of simultaneously moving forward permits at the site. So step one was the removal of materials that were too deteriorated for reuse. So there was a demolition permit related to both structures for those elements that needed to be removed. Step two is a grading permit underneath the bowling alley. If you recall the entitlement process, the kitchens are below grade, as well as the restrooms and an elevator shaft that connects both the ground floor and the subterranean portion. So that grading permit has been through one completed cycle of review, and they have just submitted their second cycle. And just so you know, some of the things that we're working through on that permit is there's a preference within the entitlement to use Ole Hansen pavers on site to try to replicate that historic look. One of the challenges there is water quality, and so initially the applicant didn't know, the extent of those impervious tiles that they would be able to use. But I think we're going to be able to work forward with a solution that has a larger underground catch basin to kind of manage their on-site water so that we can really maximize those Ole Hansen tiles on site. So that's just one element of the planning side. Obviously, there's a lot of other pieces that engineering and our consultants are looking at on the grading plan. And then the tenant improvements for both buildings were also just submitted end of last week. So those were just distributed to myself and to Nabil, who is reviewing them for the building division, Nabil Shahad. So we have quite a few sets of plans that are in at the city currently and being reviewed. There is a likelihood that I may be presenting some proposed courtyard alterations to the design review subcommittee. Again, I have not gone through the full plans yet, so I'm going to review those first, and then I've discussed that with Gabriel to bring potentially bring something forward to the design review subcommittee. Just as a quick note, one of the things I noticed that was seeming to have been altered was there was a stage in that courtyard area, and they had some accessibility issues in designing that, and so they were looking at potentially removing the stage component and having that just be at grade, and expanding the pergola in that courtyard. But that's something that we can take a look at when I have a chance to go through those plans more fully, and then discuss that with the subcommittee. But again, where we are now is that we have really plans for every aspect that have been submitted. There were some additional elements that did have to be removed from the front of the Miramar building, and there's some photos now provided online. Let me see if I can actually, I don't have a comment box available, but from our city projects, the interactive map that we have for projects in process, Kyle Weber from planning helped in uploading some additional documentation. So that includes the prior memo that I provided to Planning Commission, as well as some on-site photos. So most recently, from the images that you just saw of that front portion of the Miramar Theater, there's a cantilevered covering, and the header of that portion is actually disconnected from all of the other support beams because of the amount of decay that has happened there. So I included a few photos on that website so that the public can access that as well. And again, we're retaining the beams that are in good condition, but the header itself is going to have to be removed and replaced at that location. As we talked about before, the concrete structure, the main body of the theater is in good shape. So that structure itself won't have to be altered. There is some fire damage, again, that was expected to be addressed in the interior foyer area of the building, and that was something that was called out within our historic structures report. But that being said, I just want to, again, comment that we're going to be updating that, and actually already most of that information is updated to the project site online so that the public and anyone that has an interest can see some of those on-site photos and the rationale for replacing some of those elements tied to the documentation there. And otherwise, I am available for any questions and any ideas that the Commission has moving forward. One thing that I want to share as an anecdote on the side is that the president of the North Beach Community Association is excited about the project, and they've donated a portion of some wood that wasn't completely salvageable, and he's going to be refashioning that into a guitar for their use at the building to hang and frame. So they've interacted with some of the community members already, and I am going to be looking to also coordinate some form of a follow-up tour with our historic society as well, so that they can have access and kind of a preliminary chance to ask questions of the developing team as the project moves forward. But again, I'm here for any questions or any other ideas that the Commission might have as this project moves forward.
Any questions for Jonathan? Commissioner Brown?
Just a great update. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time.
Absolutely.
I think Jonathan just likes hanging around the planning department. He can't leave.
Well, Gabriel gave him a lot of projects to take to the third floor. He can't get away.
Gabriel leaves donuts downstairs to lure me back. It works.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jonathan. Anything else on that item?
Not for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Commissioner Brown.
I just noticed on our future agenda, Gabriel, that our September 16th meeting, you have zoning ordinance amendments with Jennifer Savage, which I guess is all the study sessions plus the ones that we didn't get through in the study sessions, and then plus In-N-Out Burger. And so you're going to bring In-N-Out Burger forward so that we can do that first, because everybody in the community is waiting for this thing. And in case we don't get to all the zoning ordinance amendments, we have to continue part of it. I don't know what your order is, but I get about 30 questions a week where In-N-Out is, and so I see it on our agenda. Hopefully you're going to hold to it, but I just make that suggestion.
Yeah, they are scheduled to be first. I might not reflect that on your agenda there, but they will be first on the agenda when it's published.
That's smart. We might get 60 people saying that they want doubles, at the meeting. So
you're absolutely right.
Okay, I did. Gabriel and I have talked a little bit about this. Our new guidelines, or more than guidelines, for commissions and committees. In those guidelines, the City Council does want a work plan from every commission and committee. Now, we're a little different. We are interrupt driven to a great degree. People put in the permits, we put in the work. But that's not the only thing that we do. And so we may want either a study session or an agenda item in a meeting in the not too distant future to talk about maybe do just a little brainstorming on what we might want in our work plan for the next year, or however long the work plan is going to be at this point, 9 months, whatever it might be. Do we want to look at updating the design guidelines? Is there any particular training or anything like that that we might want to embrace, or set of study sessions, things like that? Is there, do we want to, get the North Pico specific plan, finally wrapped up and out the door? So some of that's going to be, or a lot of it's going to be driven by what the planning department has on its plate, but it might be a discussion worthy to have either in a regular meeting or in a study session. So
good to know what Gabriel's one-year plan is himself.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that, Gabriel? Does that work for you? And is there a format that you'd like to do it in? Would you prefer a study session or a regular item, or what's your feeling?
We could do that as a study session, so we just have to figure out the timing of that. And it would be good to get the feedback for that plan, because I know some of the requests we get is to study things like, I know in the past we studied things like residential building height. Upcoming, we're going to talk about pickup and drop-off parking space operations, right? And if there's a need for standards. So there's interesting things that have come up by the Plan Commission that may make sense to include in a work plan, and maybe things that haven't come up yet, right? So it's good to at least talk about it and see what would make sense for the Plan Commission to recommend to the City Council what the work plan would be for the year.
So maybe we could slot that into the next open study session, or even if we think we've got a light study session, maybe do do two things in the study session, like 20 minutes for one and 40 minutes for the other, or something like that. Just a thought.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Any other reports? All right, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment then.
I move that we adjourn to the next regular meeting. The study session and planning commission will be held on September 16th, at 6 p.m. via teleconference.
Second.
Motion by Brown, second by Crandall. I'll read the roll. Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Aye.
And Rulon votes aye. Passes unanimously. So we will see you guys at the next meeting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim.